Al Capone, the public enemy number one of his time, held a strong opinion about himself. And I quote, "I have spent the best years of my life giving people the lighter pleasures, helping them have a good time, and all I get is abuse, the existence of a haunted man." If people like him blame everybody else but themselves, why do you think that criticizing them would do any good? Want to know how to handle such people? Want to know how to build better relationships with the people around you, with your family and friends? Stick around and you'll find out. Hey, what's going on guys? My name is Michael and you're watching Reading for a Living, the show on YouTube for future millionaires and entrepreneurs. The most successful people in the world read about a book a week. If you want to do that also but don't have time, at least watch these videos and follow this channel, because I'll bring you the core information and ideas from the books that can change your life for the better. The book of this week is Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And it talks about exactly this thing. It's divided in 4 parts and it starts with the fundamental techniques in handling people. Each part of this book has principles which are supported by telling of real stories that happened to other people, famous or not. One fundamental technique in handling people could be summarized as follows. If you want to gather honey, don't kick over the beehive. In the first chapter of this book, Dale Carnegie talks about the importance of not criticizing anyone as it attacks our very own human nature. With the little steam you blow off when scolding someone, you risk getting an enemy for life. Besides that, you don't even get your point across and the person you're criticizing will only resent you for what you have done. B.F. Skinner, the world-famous psychologist, proved that an animal rewarded for good behavior would learn better than the one punished for bad behavior. And Hans Selye, another great psychologist, stated, "As much as we thirst for approval, we dread condemnation." A great story that I liked in this book was about an incident that happened to Bob Hoover, a famous test pilot. When he returned from an air show to his home by flying his plane, suddenly both his engines stopped while in the air. He managed to land the plane, but with great damage. Fortunately, no one was hurt. The reason for this incident was that the mechanic that serviced his plane put jet fuel in the tank instead of gasoline. When Bob asked to see the mechanic, who was crying by the way, one could only expect what kind of yelling and scolding was about to happen. But instead, Bob put his arm around the scared mechanic's shoulder and said something remarkable. "To show you I'm sure that you'll never do this again, I want you to service my F-51 tomorrow." You can imagine what impression this left on the mechanic, as it contradicted every expectation he had about what was about to happen. This is the first principle of this part of the book. Don't criticize, condemn, or complain. There's only one way to truly make someone do anything, and that is to make him want to do it. The rest of the ways are temporary and can have undesirable repercussions. And remember this, one of the deepest human urges is the desire to be important. Of course, they need health, food, sleep, money, or sexual gratification, but all of this can usually be gratified. But then remains the desire to get acknowledged by the people around you. The feeling of importance can come from a job well done and getting praises from a superior or somebody you admire, or from a reputation you have built that also leads other people into admiring you. In 1921, there was a man, Charles Schwab, who was one of the first people in America to get a paid salary of over $1 million a year. If you think that 1 million is a lot of money now, just think about what it was worth in 1921. Charles explained what he considered his secret for such a salary. And that is that the greatest asset he possessed was his ability to arouse enthusiasm among his people and a way to develop the best there is in a person by appreciation and encouragement. And this line is for managers or aspiring entrepreneurs especially. He also said that there is nothing else that kills the ambitions of a person as criticism from his superiors. This is the second principle of the book, to give honest and sincere appreciation. How do you do this? It's pretty simple. Just try and find out what you like about the people you interact with and give them your sincere appreciation for that thing. Stop thinking so much about yourself and start noticing the people around you. People, whenever they get appreciation for a thing that they are doing, they start to improve on that thing and get confidence to improve in other areas also. If we apply just these two principles from the book, we can already live a better life. Just remember, don't criticize, but give honest appreciation. Are you ready to start influencing people? Just think about one thing first. If you ever go fishing and want to catch some fish, would you think about what you want to eat or what the fishes want? Thing is, every day most people think about what they want and not what others want. So the rare individual who unselfishly tries to serve others has an enormous advantage. He has little competition. Dale Carnegie, one of the richest men in the 1900s in America, learned early in life that the only way to influence people is to talk in terms of what the other person wants. In the book, there is an example from his life where his sister-in-law, who had two boys at Yale, wanted to know what the boys are doing and was writing them letters, but they were completely ignoring her. Carnegie made the bet that he could make the two boys respond to his letters if he wanted. Do you want to know how he managed to do that? He wrote his nephews a chatty letter, mentioning casually in a postscript that he was sending each one a $5 bill, money that he intentionally neglected to put in the envelope. Didn't take much time to receive a return mail thanking dear Uncle Andrew for his kind note, and you can figure out the rest. So whenever you want to persuade somebody to do something, pause and ask yourself, how can I make this person want to do it? Try to figure out what the other person might want and see if you can help him get that thing. Put yourself in their shoes and see things from their perspective. Owen D. Young, one of America's great business leaders, once said, "People who can put themselves in the place of other people, who can understand the working of their mind, need never worry about what the future has in store for them." Dale Carnegie said that if this is the only thing you get from reading this book, it may easily prove to be one of the building blocks of your career. This was principle number 3. Arouse in the other person an eager want. In the part 2 of the book, Dale talks about the ways to make people like you. Why read a book about winning friends when you can study the technique of the greatest master in the world for winning friends? Who is he? I'll give you a hint. He will wag his tail when he sees you and is also known as the man's best friend. Have you guessed who he is? The dog got his reputation because he gives you unconditional love. Let's just say this, and this is a personal conclusion. Friends usually have similar interests, and since most people are interested in themselves, if you share the same interest, you will get a friend. This is not new news. A famous old Roman poet, Publius Sirius, remarked, "We are interested in others when they are interested in us." By showing a genuine interest in others, not only will you win friends, but may develop a loyalty to your company from those individuals. This chapter provides a lot of examples about why you should become genuinely interested in other people, which is also the first principle of this part of the book. How do you make a good first impression? Have you ever stood in a room where a group of adults were staring at a baby and the baby put a big smile on his face? What happened to the adults? Oh yes, the smile. This powerful tool that we have is not only contagious, but you can even hear it when you're talking on the phone. The ancient Chinese even had a proverb about this, which can be put as follows: "A man without a smiling face must not open shop." A smile costs nothing but creates much. It enriches those who receive without impoverishing those who give. If you don't feel like smiling, what can you do? Well, you can force yourself to smile. Act as you were already happy, and that will tend to make you happy. A psychologist and philosopher, William James, put it as follows: "Action seems to follow feeling, but really action and feeling go together. And by regulating the action, which is under the more direct control of the will, we can indirectly regulate the feeling, which is not." So the second principle is pretty simple: smile. Next, the book talks about one of the most important words for each person and why you should know it too. The person name. Andrew Carnegie, also known as the Steel King, knew little about the manufacture of steel, but he had hundreds of people working for him who knew far more about steel than he did. Early in life, by the time he was 10, he too discovered the importance people put on their own name, and he used this discovery to win cooperation from other kids. When he was a boy, he got hold of a mother rabbit, which soon led to a whole nest of little rabbits, but nothing to feed them with. He had a brilliant idea though. He told the boys and girls in the neighborhood that if they would go out and get enough food to feed the rabbits, he would name the bunnies in their honor. The plan worked like magic, and Carnegie never forgot it. He used the same tactic later in life, but that time to make millions by making a merger with his competition, the company owned by George Pullman. Pullman wasn't convinced until he asked, "What would you call the new company?" Where Carnegie promptly replied, "Why, the Pullman Palace Car Company, of course." That's when Pullman's face lightened and invited Carnegie to his office to talk the business over. A talk that made industrial history. Napoleon III, the nephew of the great Napoleon, said that he could remember the name of every person he met. His technique? If he didn't hear the name directly, he would say, "So sorry, I didn't get the name clearly." Then, if it was an unusual name, he would say, "How is it spelled?" During the conversation, he would repeat the name several times and try to associate it in his mind with the person's features, expressions, and general appearance. And if the person was someone of importance, Napoleon would go to a room, write the name down on a piece of paper, concentrate on it, then turn up the paper. This is the third principle. Remember that a person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language. In the next chapter, Dale Carnegie talks about how to become a good conversationalist. Have you ever talked to someone and he was checking his phone? You asked him a question and he didn't answer because he wasn't listening. How did this make you feel? Dale tells a story about the dinner party where he was invited and about a conversation he had with a botanist. He never met a botanist before and he found him fascinating. He literally sat on the edge of his chair and listened while he spoke of exotic plants and experiments. They talked for hours, and when the time came for people to depart, the botanist said to the guest that Dale was a most interesting conversationalist. Thing is, Dale hardly said anything at all, because he didn't know anything about the subject. He instead done this. He listened intently, and he listened because he was genuinely interested. The third principle of this section is that if you want to be a good conversationalist, you need to be a good listener and encourage others to talk about themselves. Okay, but how can you interest other people? Everyone who was ever a guest at Theodore Roosevelt was astonished at the range and diversity of his knowledge. Whether his visitor was a cowboy or a diplomat, Roosevelt knew exactly what to say. And how did he do this? The answer was simple. The night before a guest came to his house, Roosevelt sat up late reading about the subject in which he knew his guest was particularly interested. Roosevelt knew, as all leaders know, that the royal road to a person's heart is to talk about the things he or she treasures most. So principle 4 is this: if you want to be interesting, talk in terms of the other person's interest. The fifth principle is pretty similar with one already presented. In this chapter, Dale talks about the human need to feel important, and it can also derive from the previous principle, that of talking in terms of the other person's interest. The principle is to make the other person feel important, but to do it sincerely. The part 3 of the book talks about how to win people to your way of thinking. This part starts with a story about an argument that Dale had at a festive occasion about a quote from a book. He started contradicting another person that they decided to ask a third person, a friend of Dale, about the correct answer. And although the friend knew that Dale was right regarding the source of the quote, he said that the other person was correct. On the way back home, Dale's friend told him that they were guests at a festive occasion. Why prove to a man that he is wrong? Is that going to make him like you? Why not let him save face? The other person didn't ask for an opinion. 9 times out of 10, an argument ends with each of the contestants more firmly convinced than ever that he is absolutely right. You can't win an argument because if you lose it, you lose it. And if you win it, you lose it. When you triumph over another person and prove his argument is wrong, you might feel fine. But what about him? He will feel inferior and you have hurt his pride. He will resent your triumph, and a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. Usually, the more you argue with somebody, the more stubborn they will become. I like the statement here that says, anyone who takes time to disagree with you is interested in the same things as you are. So in an argument, try to build bridges of understanding for your opponent's ideas by listening and giving them a chance to talk. When you hear your opponents out, dwell first on the points and areas on which you agree. Be honest when in error and apologize for your mistakes. This way you disarm your opponents and reduce their defensiveness. The first principle of this part of the book says that the only way to get the best of an argument is to avoid it. Theodore Roosevelt confessed that if he could be right 75% of the time, he would reach the highest measure of his expectation. If you can be sure of being right 55% of the time, you could go down on Wall Street and make $1 million a day. So if you can't be right even 55% of the time, why would you tell other people that they are wrong? Whenever you are telling somebody he is wrong, you are practically saying, I'm smarter than you, I'm going to tell you a thing or two and make you change your mind. And when you do this, you will just amplify the listener's ambition to stick to their opinion. Dale says that if a person makes a statement that you think is wrong, or even that you know for sure that is wrong, you can create a medium of cooperation by saying something like, well, I thought otherwise, but I may be wrong. I frequently am. And if I'm wrong, I want to be put right. Let's examine the facts. Whenever you say, I may be wrong, let's examine the facts, you will definitely avoid an argument and objection from the other person. Here I found an interesting example of a conversation that was held between 2 wood inspectors. The one who needed to accept a lot of white pine wasn't specialized in this type of wood and was accusing the other one that the wood is not according to standards. It was already a battle of egos and job status, as both were wood inspectors. The difference was that the one who sent the wood actually was an expert in white pine. Anyways, the important thing here is the approach that the expert took when dealing with the other inspector that wanted to refuse the order. He listened to his complaints and started to ask friendly questions about what pieces of wood weren't okay, and all the time insisted that the other inspector was right, although he wasn't. They analyzed the wood together. He tried to be very helpful and understand what was wrong with the wood. Gradually, the attitude of the accuser changed and the expert could explain why the wood looks in a certain way. In the end, the accuser realized the mistake was on his part and accepted the lot. This is the second principle. Show respect for the other person's opinions. Never say you're wrong. The third principle is, if you are wrong, admit it quickly and empathically. When you do this, you take the words from the mouth of the potential accuser and also confirm that he is right, which also increases his need for importance. But another thing might happen, which is the accuser might become your defender and change his speech from "I told you so" to "It's not that bad, we're humans, we make mistakes." The next 2 principles talk about beginning conversations in a friendly way and getting the other person to say yes, yes immediately. Especially when the other person expects hostility, throw a friendly attitude, as it can take the person off guard. And if you want to make him agree to something you want, first make him agree with the little things that will lead to your point. The 6th principle was already presented earlier and is implied from what you should do when you want to be a good conversationalist, which is to be a good listener and encourage the person to talk about themselves. I can say this principle builds on the previous one and tells us that you should let the other person do a great deal of the talking. The next principle for getting people to cooperate is by getting their feedback on what they would like your product or idea to have in order to be satisfying for them. This is a sales technique. For example, you could send your product to a customer you want to sell to and ask him to review your product and tell you what it would need in order to make it a great product. By making this, you make the other person think it was his or her idea, and they might even want the product or whatever you are promoting for themselves. The 8th principle was again presented earlier in another form, and is to try honestly to see things from the other person's point of view. This means not condemning them and asking yourself, how would I feel or react if I were in his shoes? Next, the book teaches us that we deserve very little credit for what we are, because if we were born in a different family or country, had a different temperament or body attributes, we would be a totally different person. Most people are not happy with who they are, and it is said that 3 out of 4 people you will ever meet are hungering and thirsting for sympathy. Give it to them and they will love you. This is also the principle, to be sympathetic with the other person's ideas and desires. The 10th principle talks about appealing to nobler motives, finding out or being intuitive on what moral motives the person would have and try to link those motives to your desired response. For example, if he is an honest individual, try and link an action you expect from him with honesty itself. The next principle is that you should dramatize your ideas. This means that sometimes you should put drama in your requests and make them seem very important. This is the technique that most of the commercials on TV use. And the last principle of this section is that you should throw down a challenge. If you want to get results from somebody or a group, stimulate some constructive competition. Not in a money-getting way, but in the desire to excel. Competition can be to reach a goal, to prove something, or to improve oneself. In the part 4 of the book, Dale Carnegie talks about being a leader, or how to change people without giving offense or arousing resentment. The first principle tells us that if we want to change someone's behavior, first we should begin our speech with praise and honest appreciation. Praise the thing the person does good, then talk about what he should improve on. Then Dale teaches us how to criticize and not be hated for it. For example, when people do something they shouldn't, like smoking indoors, give them some cigarettes and say that you would appreciate if they would smoke outside. Or if your child has good grades in school, but he also has some bad ones, praise the effort he or she made for those good grades and tell the child that by continuing with this effort, the other grades will get better also. An effective way to correct others' mistakes is by the second principle, to call attention on their mistakes indirectly. And the third principle says that a good leader talks first about his own mistakes before criticizing the other person. This way, it appears to the other person that they have something in common, the mistakes, and the leader also has the experience of doing those mistakes. Nobody likes to receive orders, and the best way to make someone do something is by asking him questions about that specific thing. For example, can we do anything to make this happen? Is there anything that can be done differently to have a satisfied customer? And so on. If somebody makes a mistake, don't humiliate them and let them save face. If you criticize somebody, especially in front of his peers, you will lose that person's support. And if you want to help somebody be more successful, praise the slightest improvement and praise every improvement. Not with flattery or general praises, but by pointing out the specific things you appreciate. Another principle that helps people, and this can be used in a good or a bad way, is to give the other person a reputation to live up to. If you portray the other person as someone that does a certain thing or behaves in a certain way and give them the impression that you wouldn't expect anything else from them, you will see that person trying to become that image. Unfortunately, this works the same if you disconsider them and put a bad label on them. On the improvement side, another principle is that you should use encouragement and make the fault seem easy to correct. You can use phrases as, "You'll get better, I see you're natural at this," or "This thing here will be simple to you since you already have this ability here," where this thing and ability is something that the person tries to do, an ability that he has. And the last principle from this book is that you should make the other person happy about doing the thing you suggest. And you do this by thinking of what the other person wants and how he will benefit by doing that thing. Guys, this was the summary for How to Influence and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. It's an important book for everybody who wants to improve his interactions with other people. And if we would apply a few rules from this book into our own lives, we could build together a better world. If you have read the book and think that I should have talked about other things also, let me know in the comment section below. And if you want to read the book yourselves, I put some links in the description with the places where you can find it. As always, like, share and subscribe if you like this video, and see you next time.